So I'll read the Mishnah. Let's see. All right. Shlosha devarim tzarich adam lomar b'toch beito erev Shabbat. So there's three things you're supposed to say in your house right before Shabbat. Im chashecha. This is right before darkness. So it's Friday. Erev Shabbat is just the word for Friday. So Friday can be the day. But im chashecha means right before nighttime. In other words, it's not Shabbat yet, but it's about to be Shabbat. And this is an oral formula that you're supposed to recite. Isartem. Did you tithe? Or did you do maser? That's the tithing is taking 10% of your produce and giving it to the temple. This is assuming the temple's in existence. So did you tithe? Something that you can't do on Shabbat, but you must do before Shabbat. Okay? Eravtem. Did you put up an eruv? There's also the different kinds of eruvs, and as we go through this, we'll see the different types that they may be talking about. The most famous is one we actually have in this neighborhood, which allows you to carry, since you're not allowed to carry outside of your house, but you make basically a big house with an eruv, which is a string. And we have one in this neighborhood, so you can carry on Shabbat. And you also can connect courtyards. So you can make a courtyard, one big courtyard, several courtyards, one big courtyard. So you put a string around it, same thing. Or there's an eruv where you extend the city, because you're not allowed to carry or even travel outside of the city limits. But maybe it's a small city, and every Shabbat you want to take a long walk outside of the city limits. So you put on an eruv that extends the limits of the city. All sorts of different types of eruv. There's also an eruv for eating, different types, which we'll get to. Anyway, but you have to set that up before Shabbat. If you don't set it up before Shabbat, then it doesn't count. And then you can't carry. You can't do what you were trying to do on Shabbat.
When you're allowed to carry within the eruv, is it to carry anything or carry things that you need?
No, it's to carry anything. Yeah, so there are a few things you're not allowed to touch on Shabbat. It's called muktzah, and you're not allowed to touch certain things because you may then be tempted to use them. Like you can't carry a pen or some kind of tool that you might be tempted to use. But that's only to guard against the temptation to use it. But in general, an eruv is everything. I remember when they first set up the eruv in this neyborhood, and just something on Shabbat, people were so happy that they could carry. I mean, the people that wanted the eruv. I walk to shul, I see them all the time, and so they're carrying like coffee cups, and they're carrying umbrellas, and like everything they couldn't carry before. The coffee cup was funny too. They're like rushing to shul, like couldn't finish their coffee, they had to take it with them, but just because they could. We have an eruv now, so now I can carry my coffee cup.
I have a question about that. Just to digress a second. If you have a gift for someone and you want to give it to them on Shabbos, like my son's going to Israel, and he's only going to see these friends on Shabbat. And so I bought baseball caps, and I said, give him the San Diego Padres hats. And he's like, but Mom, I'm going to see him on Shabbat. I can't give them to him because they can't take it from me, because they're Orthodox. Like, what is that about? Why can't
he
put
should
it on
be
his head and wear it?
Well, also, there's an eruv in Jerusalem too, so he should be able to carry anything on the. Right now, like everything in Judaism, some of these things are controversial. Like there's people that don't accept the eruv in Jerusalem because they're not sure that the authorities that put it up are halakhic enough for them. So there's people. Now that's a minority, but there are people that don't accept. There are people that don't accept the eruv in this neighborhood, even though the authority that set up the eruv in this neighborhood is supposedly the most right-wing, Orthodox rabbi in town. But there's people that don't accept his ruling because he's not right-wing enough. So there's people that don't accept the eruv. So that might be part of it. You can receive a gift. Sure. Yeah, it's not money. I mean, yeah. Right. All right. Anyway.
Thank you.
All right, so you ask yourself those two questions, Isartem, Eravtem, and then you say Hadliku et Haner. So assuming you've done those things, you've tithed. It's interesting they think those are the most important things to do right before Shabbat. Make sure you've tithed, make sure you set up the eruv. In that case, let's light the candles. Hadliku et Haner. So this isn't telling you should do these things, it's that you should say them. Right, and then presumably you do it. And also if you say it, it's supposed to remind you to do it in case you haven't done it. So then you go and do it. I didn't tithe, so I better go tithe, and then I'll light the candles. And you say it before dark to give yourself enough time. Safech hashicha, safech eno hashicha. Okay, so this brings up a whole theme that we're going to be dealing with the next several weeks. What if you don't know? So it's uncertain whether it's dark. It's uncertain whether it's not dark. In other words, you're not really sure. And here's something where we have to understand a very big difference between the modern world and the world of the Mishnah is no watches. So there's not an exact sense of time. So Shabbat starts. When does Shabbat start? Sunset. Okay, so do we know exactly when sunset is? So nowadays, in fact, we do. So you can read the New York Times every Friday, and it will say exactly. It will say Shabbat starts. So it'll say women and girls, light Shabbat, because somebody pays for that. Light Shabbat candles at 6:27, and they will know down to the second when the sun sets. Now, of course, in the old days, they didn't have watches. You have to kind of go beyond a whole different sense of what time is before they had these kind of calculations. Now, they could be fairly sophisticated, but with time, especially the folk elements and the religion, they weren't exact. So Shabbat starts at sunset. How do you know when it's sunset? You don't actually know. And people are going to disagree. So what if there's that time you don't know whether it's dark? If it's dark, Shabbos has started. But if it's light, then Shabbos hasn't started yet. And there may be conditions where it's not quite clear. Okay, so what do? So now they're just in this context. Ein masrim et avadai. You don't tithe the stuff that has not been tithed yet. That's vadai. So here's another thing too. It's very interesting to me. It relies on the fact that there's a lot of things in life that you may not be certain about, that you may have forgotten. So what is tithing? Tithing is separating 10% of your produce. Okay, so you tithe. Now, if you're like me, very much unlike my wife, but if you're like me, so you go and you look at that bunch of stuff, that produce, that pile of produce, and you're thinking, did I tithe that or not? I don't remember. It was like 3 days ago, and who remembers if I did it or not? And I didn't mark it, and I think I did, but maybe I didn't. So that's safek. You're not sure. You think you tithe, but you're not sure. And that happens all the time. So you don't know whether you actually tithed it or not. Now, there is some stuff that you didn't tithe. And I look at that pile, I know for sure I didn't tithe that. How do I know? Because it's in the non-tithe pile, and I didn't tithe it yet. But, this happens to everybody. Like, did I take that medication or not? I know I'm supposed to. 10 minutes later, I forgot. So why do we have those pill bottles that tell you what you should do is put in it every day? Because you don't remember. And same thing with tithing. They wouldn't necessarily remember. Now, some would remember, some wouldn't. And there'd be some stuff, some produce that you would remember for sure. Okay, so you're not supposed to tithe on Shabbat, but you're not sure whether it's Shabbat or not. So a lot of uncertainties. Okay, so first thing you do is you don't tithe the stuff that you know for sure you haven't tithed yet. Okay? In other words, you can't tithe. You don't tithe the non-tithe produce, but and you don't bring your dishes to the mikveh. Why you would want to bring your dishes to the mikveh it's a complicated issue. People would bring dishes, first of all, if they're brand new. But there's all sorts of reasons why you might bring your dishes to the mikveh. The main custom is if they're brand new, but you can't do it on Shabbat. So you're not sure it's Shabbat or not. You're not allowed to bring your dishes to the mikveh, which of course would mean you can't use them. And you probably want to use them on Shabbat because you're inviting your in-laws over, and it's very you want to make a good impression. But you bought new dishes, and you can't put them in because you're not sure whether it's Shabbat or not. By the way, if it's not Shabbat, of course you can do it. But if it's Shabbat, you can't. So you err on the side of caution towards Shabbat with those two things. You don't tithe stuff you haven't tithed yet, and you don't dip your dishes. But you don't light Shabbos candles. You don't light candles in general, even if it's doubtful whether it's Shabbat or not, because Shabbat may have begun, and you're definitely not allowed to light fire on Shabbat. Aval, but if it's doubtful, you can tithe the stuff that you're not sure that you tithed. You may have tithed it, you may not if you don't remember. And that stuff you can go ahead and tithe it. Okay? Now remember who gets the tithe? The temple, right? So the temple wants to has some interest here, and so no, it doesn't. So you don't tithe the stuff that you haven't tithed, but if you think you tithed it, you can go ahead and then separate it again, because the fact is you're allowed to assume at that point, well, I tithed it already, so I'm not really tithing it. All I'm doing is really confirming what I did before, and I'm not sure whether it's Shabbat or not. So it's sort of two uncertainties. I'll err on the side of giving the temple the money. Yeah.
Does that mean you give them 20%?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Well, it would end up. No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't be, because you just think you did it already. So I'll just do the same separation I did before. You're just kind of acknowledging that the tithe that I think I did 3 days ago, I actually did. So I separate that out and I say it doesn't belong to me anymore.
But if you did it once already.
No, but you don't touch it and do it again. You assume that what you did already is what you did. So you have two piles. You look at the two piles and you're not sure, did I really tithe that, or is it just the two piles? So what you say is, well, I probably tithed it, So I'll just take that pile. That pile will go to the temple, and this one won't. It's not like you're tithing again. You're just affirming what you think you did already 3 days ago, whatever it would be.
Affirmation, it's not.
Yeah, just an affirmation.
What do you
So
mean
you're
by
not
the
allowed to-
tithing of the produce?
So if you remember, it was an agrarian economy in those days, so that was mostly what people had. So if you have a bunch of apples, 10% of those apples has to go to the temple.
So what are you referring to when you said, I don't remember if I did it or not?
So you have piles in your storehouse, and you have you have the 90% pile, and you have the 10% pile, and you forgot, you didn't label it. You have a pile of apples here, a pile of apples there, and you think, gosh, I think I remember making that pile over there, the 10%, but I just don't remember doing it, but I think I did it, and so that would be uncertain. No, because you only take it over maybe once every year. So you've got to be doing we only pay our taxes like once a year. So they would pay their taxes once a year, but they would have to kind of remove or do the separation. You're supposed to do it every week. Sort of like estimated taxes. It's estimated taxes, except you don't take it over to the temple. Actually, the temple comes and picks it up. The temple would come and pick it up. But that only happens a couple times a year. But you have to tithe every Friday.
I'm just confused by your confusion. If you're standing there like, did I swallow my pill? Did I tithe the what?
The apples. Let's say I grow apples.
You grew apples, so did you?
Did I separate them? That's all you got to do is you got to separate them.
And not, can't you tell just by looking at them?
No, you can't.
But you're not.
You can't because there's a bunch of different piles and you're not very organized.
But you're not physically.
Yeah, you forgot. Yes, of course. Obviously, you should have marked it. You should say an organized person won't have this problem at all. He's going to have a sign. It's going to say tithed apples. But if it's someone like me, you just quickly you put them over in a different pile. 3 days later, you come back and what was the right pile? Which pile is which?
Can't you tell because there's like
no, because you're doing it all year. No, because you're doing it all year. No, because you're going to have like a pile of apples.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have
it's accumulating.
Right, it's accumulating, and then right. So over the course of a year, the tithe pile is going to be really big, and you're just not going to remember. And also, you're doing it per harvest, so you just don't remember with that particular harvest did I tithe or not.
But I don't understand what you're saying for you personally. If you're putting it over there, then you have to take it somewhere and give it away. It's going to get rotten if it sits there all day.
So if it's good, it's not good.
You didn't know he had so many apples.
Because not everything is going to get rotten. There's grains that don't get rotten. There's rice that doesn't get rotten. There's certain things that don't get rotten. So yes, if it's apples, the temple will come and pick it up quickly. But if it's grain, people store grain for years. Yeah, so think about grain. Grain is probably better. I don't know if they had apples back then anyway. Apples are a new invention.
Currently, what people are doing right now.
Currently right now?
The apple was it.
Is it
well, there's no temple now.
I know, but you said I can't tell if I did it or I didn't.
No, I was. No, me personally, I don't tithe.
Okay. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I was putting myself back in the.
I understand that.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
She's got all those apples filed.
It's actually a good point. The Mishnah assumes the temple standing. When they were writing the Mishnah, it wasn't standing. So the Mishnah assumes the temple was standing. It assumes a perfect world where the temple's been rebuilt. So that's interesting. So yeah, we don't tithe anymore. Nobody tithes anymore.
Symbolic, like you take a piece of the
People do symbolic stuff, but yeah, this is talking about when the temple stands.
Okay.
Now, there's taxation and people don't tithe. They do sabbatical year or stuff like that. But take a few more.
So you said that, obviously you don't want to light candles on Shabbat.
Right.
What's the downside of lighting the candles if you're not sure when Shabbat is?
Because you may be breaking Shabbat. If you're not sure.
What's the downside of lighting it earlier if you mean it?
You forgot.
Oh, you forgot.
You forgot. Yeah.
But there's no.
All this is based on
lighting it.
Yeah, all this is based on sloppiness. Like you forgot, you were rushed, and now, is it dark? Isn't it? Yeah, clearly you should do it ahead of time. You should tithe, and you should keep track of your crops. But the Mishnah is responding to people that don't,
The candle has to be lit. This is the Shabbos period, so it can't be too early.
Can't be too early, right?
No, you don't want to light in the morning.
Right.
Then the penalty for not keeping Shabbat was so severe.
Yeah.
So if a woman figured it out.
They didn't carry that out. All right, let's keep going. Okay, Masrim et hadamai. Okay, so you do tithe stuff that you think you may have tithed, but you're not sure. Arvim. So then you do put up an eruv. So even though you're not sure if it's dark yet, you are still allowed to go and put up the eruv. V'tomnim et hachamim. And you can put the stuff that you want to keep hot through Shabbat onto the fire. right? To keep it shut, like cholent is the classic example, but also hot water, whatever you want to stay hot. Even, you're not allowed to do that when it's dark, so when Shabbat starts, but if you're not sure, you're allowed to do it. That's the Mishnah. Okay? Questions? A lot of questions. Okay. Gemara.
Some of the apples, that was the big. No more apples.
Minahani mile. All right, so the first question for the Gemara, where do these words come from? So this law about the recitation, that's what it's about. It's about the recitation. So the law is about tithing and what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do on Shabbat. Those are already understood. What the Gemara is asking is, how do we know we're supposed to recite those things? Other than it's just an obvious thing, a mnemonic, like remind yourself. But how do we know we're supposed to recite those three phrases? Remember what the phrases are. Have you tithed? Have you put up an Eruv yet? Okay, light the candles. Those are the three. 2 questions in one statement. All right, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, Amar Kra, it says in Scripture, V'yadata ki shalom ohalecha. You should know for the sake of peace in your tent, peace in your house. So this tells us that you do the reminder because you want to have peace of mind that you've actually done it. So you want to have a peaceful Shabbos. And you don't want to have to go through Shabbos thinking, did I tithe? Didn't I tithe? Did I put up the Eruv? Did I not put up the Eruv? So you remind yourself ahead of time because it'll give you a peaceful Shabbos. So that's why you recite this. It's obvious. It's just to jog your memory. Maybe you would have forgotten. Okay? And then these things also help you enjoy Shabbat. Because the Eruv helps you enjoy Shabbat because you can walk from place to place, carry from place to place. Tithing helps you enjoy Shabbat because you know you've done your bit for the temple. And you want to make sure that you've done it.
I thought Eruv was a community type thing, not individual.
But it helps the individual.
Right. Yeah, but the individual.
Oh, individuals. Yes, no, but individuals can do an Eruv, like if you want to extend your courtyard to your neighbor's courtyard, you can do that yourself. Yeah, this neighborhood is a communal Eruv. Different people do it.
But until they had that, there were some next door neighbors.
There were, absolutely.
Did their own. So
that's right.
Together.
So
that's right.
They bring food or something.
Yeah. They go back to that with each other.
Harvey.
I know in LA they check there's people that check the arrow every week.
Oh, of course,
make sure it's okay, and then they either put up on a website or they send people emails that the arrow's okay.
No, you have to check it every week. That's the halakha. You have to check it every week because, in fact, you have to put it up every week. The Mishnah is you have to put it up every week. So what if it's up already and it's permanent? That just means that you check it. So you have to check it every Friday, and you have to inform the community. So that's not an extra chumrah that they're taking on. That's part of what it means to have an Eruv. Someone has to check it. Yeah.
Right, and in Cincinnati they have a phone number you can call, and it says the Eruv is kosher or the Eruv is not kosher.
Yeah. All right.
Literal translation of Chumrah, Rabbi.
Oh, Chumrah is strict. It's not being extra strict to check the Eruv. In fact, you're supposed to check the Eruv every Friday. Okay. I'm in the middle of the verse. Ki v'yadata ki shalom alecha. So you'll feel peace in your tent. Ufakadata navcha. So you'll check your dwellings, v'lo techata, in order that you not sin. So you should check the things that are going on in your household. You'll feel good. You'll have a sense of peace, and you also won't sin. That's the verse that he says is referring to not the Eruv itself, but the statement to remind you to put up the Eruv and to tithe. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, afal gav damur Rabbanan shlosha devarim tzadich adam lomar v'chulei. Okay, so even though the rabbis say you're supposed to say these things, he says you're supposed to say them gently. You don't say them in a panicky way, and you also don't say them in a strict way. So what does that mean? It's like, you don't say, have you tithed? Did you put up the Eruv? Because if there's a sense of meanness in your voice, first of all, who are you talking to? You're talking to your kids? You're talking to your wife, your spouse? If you say it in a mean way or in a panicked way, then they're going to tend to say, yes, of course. And maybe they're lying. Right, because you seem like you're so intent on this, and maybe your voice is verging on nasty. So the rabbis say, make sure you say it in a very gentle way. Hey, if you tithe? Oh, okay, no problem. You haven't? We'll go do it right now. You do it in a gentle way. But also because you want to enjoy Shabbat.
Right.
So you're that's right. Right. They're trying to make sure that you're not in the kind of this panicky frame of mind. Did I put the tithe? Did I put the stuff on the blech yet? You want to ease into Shabbat with a sense of peace and not with a sense of conflict. So in order that people will actually listen to the question. and take it seriously and really do it. But if you say it in a mean way, a nasty way, a quick way, a panicky way, then people might lie and say, yes, I did do the Eruv. Because they're afraid that you're going to say, what do you mean you didn't do it yet? And then they're running around, and then you're starting Shabbos with an argument. Okay. Amar Rav Ashi, Ana lo shamia le had Rav Bar Hana v'kayamti misvara. So Rav Ashi said, I actually never read that idea that you're supposed to say it softly and gently, but I do it anyway, just out of common sense. So that's common sense. A common sense in a household, right? You're approaching Shabbat. You should always speak gently to each other. It's simply common sense. You don't need to have that in the Mishnah. Okay.
Even not Shabbat.
Right. That's his point.
Thank you.
All right. Ha gufa kashya. So the Mishnah itself has an internal contradiction. So now we're going to read this. Ve'amarta. Amarta. Shlosha devarim tzadich adam lomer b'toch beito. Erev Shabbat im chashicha. You say in the Mishnah there's 3 things you're supposed to say in your house right before Shabbat. Im chashicha. Right before Shabbat in. So in other words, right before dark. You're telling us you say these things right before dark. Okay, so I understand. You're only supposed to say these things before dark. Safech chashicha, safech eno chashicha, lo. But in the case of doubt, so there's 3 time periods we're dealing with right now. Right before Shabbat, where you know that it's not Shabbat yet. The doubtful time, where you're not sure. And when it's dark, when you know that it's Shabbat. Okay, so the Mishnah seems to be dealing just one of those time periods, which is the period right before Shabbat. You are certain that it's not dark yet, but it's close to being dark. Okay? V'hadar tani safek chashicha, safek eno chashicha me'arev. But then you come back and say, during that doubtful time, you are allowed to put up the Eruv. So if during that doubtful time you're allowed to put up the Eruv, why are we including that statement, have you put up the Eruv yet, when it's light? You actually have a little bit more time, even when it's dark. So that's an internal contradiction in the Mishnah. What do you do about the Eruv? So can you actually put up the Eruv when it's dark?
No.
Well, but if it's doubtful dark, and maybe you are, though. So you're putting it up. You're risking violating Shabbat if you're not sure whether it's light or dark. So the first part of the Mishnah says that you only ask that question when it's light, because you want to make sure to put up the Eruv when it's light. But the second part of the Mishnah implies maybe it's okay under certain circumstances to put up the Eruv when it's dark.
So it's an understanding.
Yeah. Okay. So before we answer the question, we're going to answer the question. Before we answer the question, there's a little mnemonic that the Talmud would like to give us that we're going to read and then we're going to ignore. It somehow it just shows it comes up out of nowhere. Siman. So siman always means a mnemonic is a way to remember. A time when people didn't have written books, so they had to memorize the Talmud too. So they had to have mnemonics, ways of remembering. And what they would do is they would have words, just like we might remember something right now, is they would have words, and the first letter of each word would stand for something. So it's giving us now a mnemonic to remember the Shabbos rules that we've learned up to this point. Okay, with words. Zimra, Tzipra, Bachalva, Damilta. These are the words self, pruning, bird, cord, silk. What do these words mean? I'm not going to tell you. It's too complicated. Each letter stands for stuff that that they've studied in this tractate up to this point. Now, why is this here right now? I have no idea. No one knows why. It got put in probably out of order. Okay. Now we're going to answer the question. By now you've forgotten the question, even though it was 10 seconds ago. But the question is, what's the deal with the Eruv? Are you allowed to put it up when it's light, when it's dark? The Mishnah seems to say both things. So here's the answer. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rav, Lo Kashya. Oh, these rabbis say, finally, in the name of Rav, it's not a contradiction. Kan be'eruvei tchumim. Okay, so now, because it's 2 different eruvs. Okay, in one case, the eruv tchumim. The eruv tchumim is the standard eruv that we think about, where you put a string around a neighborhood and you're allowed suddenly to carry. Okay, that would, under all circumstances, be forbidden to put up when you think it might be, even when you think it might be dark, even when you're not sure, because you certainly can't put that up. It doesn't count. I'll put it that way. It doesn't count if you put it up in the dark, when it's Shabbat already. Not dark, it's up, but when it's Shabbat already. So that for sure. Kan be'eruve chatzerot. But there's another kind of eruv where you're just connecting your courtyard to another courtyard, so to your neighbor. So this is areas that kind of built and made courtyards out of it, and sometimes there's a little narrow path right in between, so you could actually put a string that connects two courtyards, so you can go visit your neighbors just one over. That we're less strict about. That if you're not sure that it's dark, go ahead and put that string up, because you're not doing it over a whole neighborhood, and then it will count.
So we use the Arab Trumin would be more like a community.
Yeah, exactly.
Within.
Yeah.
So we put the Arab once and we leave it alone.
Yeah.
So why can't we do the same thing with Arab Chatzerin, where you put the Y or whatever once?
Yeah.
Why do we have to do it every Shabbat?
Yeah, because actually you can't just put it up once. The Tchumim, even the one that's over a whole neighborhood, you can't put up once and leave it alone. You have to do something, even if it's symbolic, to put it up. The commandment is you have to put it up every Shabbat, every Friday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, every Friday. So that's why they check it. So and maybe they do a symbolic little adjusting, but you actually have to do this every Friday.
Is there a ritual involved?
There's a ritual involved. There is. You say a blessing. There's a ritual involved. Yeah, you're putting it up every Friday, and that's the checking it.
Rabbi, I have a question for you.
Martha.
I mean, in a way, it makes sense, because if the community has to know whether it's kosher, they can't. If you wait till the very last minute, there's no way to notify everybody.
Right, it's true. Yeah. It's also part of preparation for Shabbat. There's certain rituals that are prepared for Shabbat. You wash your clothes. You dress up. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other part is when you check it I can't even remember a time when my son checked an Arab and there was no problem.
Right. Oh, is that right? Really? Oh, okay.
Right, because it's outside,
birds fly into
the
it,
wind
right?
blows
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
birds fly into it, and all kinds of things can happen. You hope it's not a big drastic thing.
We are about to read several examples of things that can go wrong with an Eruv. Yeah, and things that were common in the 3rd, 4th century. Yeah.
Would once you have the Eruv established, and say a non-Jew decides he's going to break it after Shabbat has already started, does that mean that the whole thing is?
That's an excellent question. I think that I will wait because the Talmud asked that question. So the question is, what if something happens to the Eruv on Shabbat? It can easily happen. Right, a wind could come and knock it down on Shabbat. It was fine on Friday when you called 1-800-ERUV. It told you kosher. So but and then you see it, because you can see these things. So you see it and it's not there. So what do you do? And you're carrying on Shabbat. So it's one thing. So maybe you drop the stuff so you don't carry. But it's a good question. Is an Eruv? I'm almost tempted to give you the answer because the answer is so interesting, but I feel like maybe I should wait till we read it ourselves. What do you think?
Next week.
We won't remember.
The answer is that the Eruv is kosher, so it counts retroactively. Once it's been certified kosher on Friday, if something happens to it on Shabbat, it doesn't matter. It's still now there's right. So kosher. You'll see that next week. We'll read it next week. But I couldn't let you wait a week because I think that's so interesting too. Because it shows it's almost like a virtual thing. As long as it was okay on Shabbat, doesn't matter what happened. I mean, before Shabbat on Friday, if something happens to it on Shabbat, it's as if it's still there. So it's the action of putting up the Eruv more than the Eruv itself, which matters, right?
It's the intention.
God, man, I knew that.